Christian Parenting.
Hey guys, Daniel Crawford here, nearing the end of the year, to which most of us will happily say good riddance to 2020, but truly, I'd venture to say that anyone listening has walked through some really hard things with our families in this unprecedented year of COVID and school closures and economic uncertainty, more screen time than ever, higher rates of all the things you don't want to see, lower rates of all the things you do. The list goes on. We'll say that it has been a privilege and honestly has felt pretty poetic to launch the Life Upside Down podcast in a year where most everyone can relate to that sentiment in one way or another. And so before we start this episode, I wanted to take just a moment to brag on the group that has made these conversations possible. ChristianParenting.org is an online resource that offers practical help and biblical encouragement to people and parents just like you. And so they published the workbook that we wrote together called A Parent's Guide to Sorrow and Suffering that's on the website. And they are behind the production of this podcast, along with many others in the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. And so here's the deal. Christian Parenting is 100% donor funded and relies on listeners like you to support the future creation of resources like this. And so if you've been enjoying these early episodes, would you please consider making a donation to Christian Parenting today? To make this easy, you can just go to www.cpgive.org. That's cpgive.org. And if you make a donation today, your gift will actually be doubled thanks to a generous donor that has stepped forward with a $10,000 matching grant. And so you give 20, but Christian Parenting actually receives 40, and so on and so forth. And that's going to impact more parents in 2021 and beyond. So all parents need a trusted community. All parents need a reminder that it's okay to be imperfect. All parents need Jesus. And as parents come to know and love Jesus more, so do their kids. And it's a beautiful thing. So please consider giving today, www.cpgive.org. And thanks so much for your generosity.
Where do you turn when life turns upside down?
Is there hope for the hurting? Can we find joy in the sorrow?
This is the Life Upside Down podcast with Abel Speaks, and we're your hosts, Daniel and Kelly Crawford.
Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome, friends, back to the Life Upside Down podcast.
I feel like it's been so long.
It has been so long since we recorded. The people listening, it's only been 7 days,
I know,
Kelly.
Right. Sorry. Guys.
It's okay. We're back again, of course, on our routine rhythmic schedule.
That's right.
And not rusty at all, and just super excited for another conversation. Kelly's dropping her phone. We're going to get it together.
We're ready.
We're going to get it together. For a conversation that we got for you guys today with somebody that I'm just excited to tell you more about, not only the mission and the organization that Matt Mooney leads, and as well as just the story that the Lord's entrusted to him and the way that his story has impacted and intersected with ours. I know you're going to be blessed by the conversation. So Matt Mooney, welcome to the podcast, bro.
Hey-o, how we doing, guys?
Oh, we are getting our heads screwed on for the day.
That's right. That's
Clearly.
right. Yeah, thanks for being here and just imparting your wisdom to all of our listeners. So we can
quick bio too, just to give you at least some context up top, is that Matthew Lyle Mooney is the co-founder of 99 Balloons with his wife Jenny. That stems from their story with their firstborn son Elliot. They since have 3 other kiddos in their home. And we're going to hear more about the Mooney fam to current day and more about the work that 99 Balloons is doing with the disability community locally and abroad. Why don't you tee them up to get going?
Great. So we will have the opportunity to talk about the organization that you've founded and that you've given your life to. But first, let's back up a little bit. And can you just share with us some of your backstory and just leading up to the season that would come to alter kind of the trajectory of you and Jenny's life?
Well, here we go. Put your seatbelts
That's
on.
right.
Unbuckle.
Buckle up.
Jenny and I married young. I'm now 43 years old. I'm owning it. 43, feeling free. And so more gray hairs every day. You said I have wisdom. I don't think I've quite attained that yet. So maybe that'll come at 53. But Jenny and I really just to move along my story quickly for others, we had been married 5 years and we had a really kind of easy sailing marriage, easy sailing lives, to be honest. We had kind of done youth ministry together. I was out of that. We had moved back to Fayetteville, Arkansas for me to go to law school, and we got pregnant during law school. And just as everybody plans and wants to do, we're having our first child with no money, zero of the incomes, zero of the dollars, and we didn't know any other way. So we were super excited. We began just dreaming and preparing, and just like every other young, unprepared parent does, that's kind of what we do. So I had promised to quit cussing, and she was beginning to nest. I did not fulfill my promise, but she did make the house look fantastic. And so we began just kind of preparing for that baby. And I remember just one doctor appointment. They left. One doctor left, and three doctors walked back in. And when they walked back in that moment, we knew without words that everything had changed. It was very somber. They talked very slow. They said a lot of big medical terms that I, at that time, did not know that I do know now. And they began to explain to us that something was wrong. There were a lot of abnormalities. I was kind of having an out-of-body experience, as you can imagine. And so I don't remember what all they said. But eventually, we found out that our first child, didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, that our first child was diagnosed in the womb with trisomy 18. And so a lot of people know trisomy 21. Maybe a lot of your listeners are familiar with trisomy 18. Most of the world's probably not. But you have 3 chromosomes where you should have 2. On that 18th pair, trisomy 21 is Down syndrome. People are more familiar with it. It's more common, and it's a little less serious of a diagnosis. So folks with Down syndrome go on live a fantastic, happy, beautiful life. Know many of them. Down syndrome, trisomy 18, trisomy 13, a little typically more serious. Those children don't make it to birth often, and if they do, short lives often. And so we begin to prepare that. Here we were now, very quickly, we were preparing for our first child while also being told not to expect that child to have a long life, if a life at all. And so that was a very obviously trajectory, as you said, trajectory changing day for us. And that set in motion really a lot of where our lives have been in the last 15 years. Elliot, it was a boy, and he was born, and he was beautiful and amazing. And Elliot lived for 99 days. And so, nothing that I say, no thing that I've been a part of, and we've been a part of beautiful things, changes the reality that I miss Elliot every day. And there's no bow on our story. I make sure nobody ties a bow on it. If I could do it different, I'd do it different. And if somebody's in that situation, I want them to hear that. I'm not something that you want to try to attain. I promise you that. I miss him. We haven't arrived. We haven't gotten over it. I'm not over it. We're still living out what grief and missing Elliot looks like today. And we do have 3 kiddos today. So we're living the middle school life now. We have three kids in middle school, 1 boy, 2 girls. Our oldest is adopted from our work, which began through 99 Balloons. So we released a balloon for every day of Elliot's life and started an organization working with kids and adults with disability called 99 Balloons. And that's how we got to know our oldest daughter, Lena, who we adopted from Ukraine. And Lena has profound autism. She's nonverbal, and she kind of has a story all her own. But we now work with 99 Balloons, working with families with disability, but we also experience it as a family living still with disability. So that's, I tried to go short. I don't think I achieved that, but we covered a lot there. That was a lot of life covered.
That was well-rounded.
Yeah, that's about as concise as you could hope. And it almost feels like we're getting shortchanged. And so, man, if I could also just to take a moment to respond to what you've shared up to this point. I loved the disclaimers that you put there. And hey, it's not just, hey, we've seen so much, beauty and redemption. We have, but not that just completely resolves and puts a bow on anything, and that replaces in any way the loss of our first son. So and then you said, I'm not something you want to attain to. So it's like, hey, duly noted, humility acknowledged. And yet I would just say for a moment, and even to just people listening, if you hear echoes of Matt's story, the Mooney story with the Crawford's story, that's not a coincidence. And the reality is that Matt and Jenny and Elliot and their story, when we were walking through our season in utero with Abel, and since that time, the Lord was kind and gracious to allow us to come across their story, and even to allow us to get into contact with. Dude, I think you were probably the first dad that I actually talked to, and gave graciously of your time, and did share wisdom with me, whether you would call it wisdom or not. It was things that resonated with me at the time, and honestly ever since then. And so, as Second Corinthians 1 just talks about this beautiful cycle of us receiving comfort in times of affliction, and then getting to a place where we're also able to pass that comfort on. And the way we've been comforted and cared for by people, the Lord will give us opportunities to comfort and care for others thereafter. And so, man, it's not an overstatement to say that the fact that Abel speaks exists is tethered in part to the fact that Ellis speaks, man, and that Ellis still speaks. And so, we would be remiss if we didn't just take a moment to just say that, and to just thank you for your past and present faithfulness, stewarding Elliot's life, and stewarding your sorrow and your suffering in a way that points people to Christ even in the midst of it. And so, with that said, there is a specific quote, a very pithy line that we've lost count of the amount of times that we have stolen it and
Yes.
shared it with other people frequently, especially if it's in a public setting. I'm like, I give you credit. So if people know Matt Mooney's
That's
name,
right.
if they've heard us talk on some of this stuff before. But you said the quote, it's in your book as well, which is called A Story Unfinished, and was one of those just landmark books that I got to, in addition to visiting with you, got to read. And you talked about how in your relationship with God, that after everything that's happened, and after loving and losing your first child, you understand God less, and yet somehow paradoxically you know him more. I can't tell you how many times I've said that. And when I say that, people are like, wow, man, that was really profound. And it's like they're gonna go quote me on it. It's like, no, that was something Matt said. And so man, if I could, will you flesh that out for us? That's like the most amazingly powerfully pithy statement. But when you wrote that, will you just, for all of our benefit, will you explain what you mean when you say that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm most likely I stole it from someone, so don't feel bad. I do a lot of reading, and the minute that I get attributed something, it makes me fearful. So um, we're all in this together. I will say I think there's two sides of the coin to that quote, and what gives you great comfort in that quote also makes people very uncomfortable in that quote, because what that quote is attempting to speak to is the mystery of God. And we are in a Western culture that we like strategies and we like steps, and we want God to be on the Marie Kondo method, right? Like, give me the bullet points to follow so that I have the good life. Just lay it out for me, pastor. Lay it out for me, book writer. Lay it out for me, church. Right? Like, what group do I sign up for in the back? Because I want to be happy. I want my family to be happy. And God just doesn't, in Scripture and in our lives. He just doesn't work like that, and it's extremely frustrating. Like, I mean, God just does not care to be frustrating to us. I don't know if he enjoys it. I don't know if it is the way that it is. But Elliot's life for me, and, not receiving the answer to the thing that I prayed for the most in my life. For me, I expected to wrestle with my faith. Uh, I really did. Like, I'd read enough books, knew enough stories. Like, okay, this is how this is going to go. Like, I'm going to lose my son, and then I'm either going to walk away from God and say, forget that, or I'm not. Like that's the way that I looked at what was coming, and I saw it coming, and it just didn't play out like that for me at all, because God was so evident to me in Elliot's life, and he was so near, in fact, nearer to me. Now I look back at that time as like high water mark of God's evident presence and just nearness to me. And yet, in that nearness to me, he was not doing what I was asking. He was not giving me what I wanted. And so that is very confusing, to be comforted by a God who you believe in and you're experiencing more than ever, and yet at the same time looking into his face and hearing no. That is a mysterious, awful, terrible reality. So for me, I was nearer to him, and yet I was confused by him and by that nearness, because what I wanted, so often what I want in my life is not good things, y'all. Like, but I'm like, God, this is, I want something good. I want my son to live. Like, come over here and do this. Get in my boat. You are supposed to be for me and with me. Where are you in this? Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but the same thing that comforts you should also, in some ways, terrify us, because that is what a relationship with God looks like. I wish it looked more like a 5-step program, but it looks more like wading into this big, enormous reality of otherness that, if you look to Job, ends up quieting you, but you don't quite get the answers that you hope for always.
We look back on our season with Abel, which we're like coming up on 5 years, and we almost long for that season, because like everything that was unimportant in the world kind of fell away, and it was just so clear God's presence and nearness, and just the peace that we had from that, and just like what matters in this life. And even now, having walked through that experience, and being almost 5 years removed from it, it's so easy to have all of these distractions, and knowing those are distractions, but having a hard time setting them aside. And so I think we often talk about and share with others, which I think can feel confusing to them, but it's the mystery of God that you're talking about, that it's like we long for that in such a tangible way, like we had in that season, which we have it all the time, right? But it's harder when life gets busy. And so one thing too, we wanted just to see if you could tell us a little bit about 99 Balloons and the mission you guys are on here in the US, but also globally.
Yeah, so 99 Balloons is a huge gift to us. We started it, and we're now a small, insignificant part of it, and we just get to watch it. But what the gift to us has been is starting 99 Balloons. Really, we started it, to be honest. Like, we just loved what we learned through Elliot's life and through God's teaching us of just the value of his life, though it didn't measure up to the world standards in any way, shape, or form, and just the beauty and the unbelievable worth of his life. Even though it was 99 days, even though he couldn't fill in the blank with whatever measurement, like, he didn't live. We were in awe of just his life. Every day was a gift. And so losing him obviously was the hard part of that reality. Taking care of him was the fun part. So we started 99 Balloons as a way to just live out the things that we feel like God had shown us, and we really had no outlet for. I mean, it was real simple. We started this night called Recess, and people brought their kiddos with disability. We welcomed our friends into kind of a respite night scenario. And so now, fast forward, 99 Balloons has grown, and we get to do global work helping children and adults with disability be welcomed into communities. And we do work in Uganda through partners in Nicaragua and Haiti and some other areas. And then we do stateside work with helping the church become more inclusive of individuals with disability, be it children through our Recess program or adults through Befriend, which is just a friendship model that churches do. So 99 Balloons is such a gift to us. It's so beautiful. And for us, like you might hear the story of like Elliot in transmuted, and now you're working with it. But for us, it makes perfect sense. And it kind of just harkens back to the question that we were just talking about a little bit, in that like 99 Balloons to us and the work of working with our friends with disability and our families experiencing disability is just such a great, mysterious place to be in the world, and to welcome both believers in Jesus and followers of Jesus into that, as well as the world who kind of watches that and says, "Oh, what's going on here?" It's a great reminder to the world when we build relationships with our friends with disabilities, or with those that the world marginalizes, and honestly that the church oftentimes marginalizes as well. It's a great place to be, and to put a signpost of like, we are really bad at finding our way to flourishing, right? Like we think that the way that we flourish, and you see this in scripture, in scripture in John 9, there's this story, and the disciples are going out, and there's a guy who's blind from birth, and the disciples ask Jesus, they have two options for Jesus. Was it this man's sin, or was it his parents' sin that caused this? That was what they asked Jesus, okay, in John 9:9. And Jesus came back to them and said, it's neither this man nor his parents that sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. So this is what we get to do through 99 Balloons all the time, is just remind people that we're really bad at finding flourishing, and that Jesus welcomes us into a more beautiful, more holistic picture than what I call the two bucket bros. The disciples and Matt Mooney, pre-Elliot, were two bucket bros. Like, hey, is the problem this or this, right? What's the problem here? And Jesus looks at it and says, there is no problem here. We have this idea of there's a good bucket and there's a bad bucket, right? And we don't have to do anything, just be born into our world. Our experiences, our culture, our biases, our flawed theology, like we don't have to do anything to get that. It comes to us. Thank you, America. And we think like, hey, there's the good things. I'm going to go around the bad things, and I'm going to go to the bucket of good things, and I'm going to get as many things out as I can. And like over and over, no matter how many times you see people's lives explode, that like you look and you go, well, they had like 3 or 4 of the good things going, right? And Jesus is offering us something so much better than that, so much more beautiful than that. And pain and suffering and hard, horrible things are so often the ways that he does the beautiful, magnificent, wonderful things that we want to be a part of. And we would have gone right around it if we were given our choice. And so this 99 Balloons is a signpost to the world of like, hey, these you know what stories we like, guys? We like before and after stories. All right. We like, here is Matt's life. Matt was unhappy, and Matt did these 3 things. Now Matt is happy. We love those. Like the story ends, maybe you get like some windblown hair, and we're all like happy. You know, the stories that we do not like right now, Western culture, America, we do not like the in-between stories, right? The stories that do not resolve, we're very uncomfortable with that. That's what my book, you acknowledge, you talked about it, but a story unfinished, like the fact that God is going to make everything right, that he's going to set everything right, that actually means that it's not right now.
Right.
So somehow in Christian world, we are so uncomfortable with people's pain and suffering when they're in the in-between. And they might be in the in-between until the end of their life. It might never be set okay. We have a hope that's so much greater than putting a little Band-Aid on people with a casserole and a verse and saying, well, God works it for good, so you should probably move on.
Right.
Can you move on and get past this because you're making me really uncomfortable? When in reality, Jesus is taking things out of what we think is the bad bucket, the pain, the suffering, the hurt. He's taking things out of the good bucket. He doesn't delineate the way that we delineate. He works all things for good, all things for his glory. And so often spiritual formation comes in the costume of suffering and pain, and we want nothing to do with it.
I think even we've talked on other episodes too, just this idea of good, and that our human minds, what we think is good, is kind of what you're saying is totally opposite of what God is saying is good. And so for spiritual formation and maturity, what we've experienced and seen in so many other people's lives is just walking through a season or an entire life of suffering and hardship is really what makes us more like Christ and helps us know him more. And so ultimately we can call that good, right? At the end of the day, not what we want. Similar, what you said about Elliot is like so true for us too. Like all the things that have come out of Abel's life that we can see as like the goodness from God, we would trade it all for Abel to still be here. It's like it's not worth it to me, and that's my own like human sin, right? Of just like, it doesn't matter. It's all for nothing. Like I would still choose for him to be here, but we can, so living in that like tension, right? Of it's like, I would have it be different, but I can still see like God working and using it. It's uncomfortable for people to sit in that tension sometimes, I think. So
well, thank you for saying that. So that gives you credibility in the mind of people that are suffering. They will listen to you. If you tell them you should get over it, or if you tell them, well, the good that you've seen should be good enough that you don't want that thing, nobody experiencing suffering will ever listen to you. You have no credibility. They think obviously you haven't walked through something, because that's the stupidest, dumbest thing you could say. Like and I actually, and we don't have to go into the theology 101, but I don't think that that's a sin. I think God is with me in the boat, that he wishes that Elliot. Now, it didn't play out that way. And I'm not in control. And if I hold on to that, like if I become bitter, it can become sin. But I applaud you. I like that line that I said early on in our podcast is, what you said, I say all the time. And it's like a dividing line in people, in what they believe. And I say it, I say it pithy, and I say it, I think that's the way I need to look up that, make sure I'm using that right.
yeah, no, that's right.
But, I say, hey, I have seen God through 99 Balloons do incredible things that I could never have imagined. I have seen, and I usually like fill in the blank, I've seen this and I've seen that. I've seen kids in Uganda get to go to school. I've held children in Haiti, and like, I've been a part of just beautiful stories through 99 Balloons. And I always say, and I would give it all back for 5 more minutes with Elliot. Mm-hmm. And I don't apologize for it. And that's because I love my son like God loves me, right? And so that love is not a bad thing. That love is a wonderful, beautiful, God-given gift that we both got to experience. And it didn't go the way that we wanted. But, that I'll tell you, man, it never fails that I will have a line of people wanting to talk to me. Within that line of people, when I'm done speaking, will be at least a few who are like, that's the thing. They can't get past that I will not let go of. I would give it all back for 5 more minutes. And they are that makes them very uncomfortable because they want to think that God in his grace will change that in my heart. And I think God in his grace, he can. I open that up to him. If I'm wrong, I hope that he shows me. But God in his grace has never asked me to say anything different. And he may tomorrow, but he has never asked me to get up in front of people and say, and now it's all better. And boy, howdy, when I got to be a part of that, I thought, boy, this is really worth it. I really measure this almost equal, if not more. He's never asked that of me. And I don't think he thinks it. I think he grieves with me. I think, Jesus, when Jesus was at the tomb of Lazarus, okay, Jesus is at the tomb of Lazarus, and Lazarus has died. And guess what? End of the story, we can read this amazing thing called the Bible. We can read ahead and see what's going to happen. And Jesus is going to raise Lazarus from the dead. It's all going. Everybody's going to be happy. We actually, because Jesus is there, we get the windblown good ending. Yeah. He actually is going to. Lazarus comes out and he is alive. And guess what Jesus does? Jesus, he cries, tears. So all these people in line at the end of my talk would come up to Jesus and be like, hey, Jesus, kind of stupid for you to be crying because you're about to heal this guy and give him life. Dry your eyes, Jesus. What a stupid fool you are. Absolutely not. Like, Jesus sees death and he sees the reality of what's become of his people, and he knows what he had for them and what we're experiencing, and there's a miss in that. So when we miss our sons, we evidence Jesus to the world, not when we pretend like he's made everything fine and he actually hasn't. Then we lie to the world. And so I obviously have strong feelings on that one, guys, but that it's important to me that we're honest with like God is in it with us, and we can be honest about it, and that pain evidences his grace to us, not his inability to make all things better. We have a hope that's anchored in the future of what he's doing.
Well, at this point, you can see why we love this guy, and we have got another half hour with Matt Mooney coming up next week. We will see you then as we enter into the home stretch of this inaugural season of Life Upside Down.
This has been the Life Upside Down podcast, powered by Christian Parenting.
Our vision is that every parent and every person might experience hope and joy even in the midst of sorrow. If you found today's content helpful, we'd invite you to pass it along to a friend who might be encouraged as well.
You can find us at christianparenting.org/lifeupsidedown, and we hope you'll continue the journey with us in the weeks to come.
We'd also invite you to check out ablespeaks.org to learn more about the mission we've given our lives to. We'll see you next time.